Hi, hello, and 안녕하세요. My name is Lee, and welcome to my channel. Today, I will be reviewing and discussing the South Korean LGBT film, Man on High Heels. Man on High Heels is an action thriller drama following Yoon Ji-wook, a much feared and respected police detective in Seoul. However, just as Yoon decides to leave the force and their violent past behind in order to begin medically and publicly transitioning, they find themselves in the crosshairs of a violent gangster. Now, normally I would go through release information, festivals and awards lists, box office and admission statistics, viewer responses and critics' reviews, perhaps even the director's background, as filmmaker Jung Jin has a long and seasoned career. And if you're interested in finding those details, great, I've still provided those resources down below in the description box. However, for this film, I'd like to sidestep all of that and just jump right into review and analysis. High Heels has a lot of thematic heft and subtext, but before that, I'd like to give some disclaimers. As I stated when reviewing Rainbow Eyes, I'm speaking from a place of cisgender exclusive experiences as well as privilege. However, I will attempt to speak with as much nuance, compassion, and sensitivity as possible in this critique. Sussing out good representation is significantly harder than criticizing bad representation. The bad can be demonizing, dehumanizing, shallow and flat, or lean into obvious stereotypes, while the good requires nuance and complexity. But to be spotted, it can be strengthened by its ability to relate to the personal experiences of a viewer that more closely resembles what it's representing. Consequently, there is little weight, coming from me, to definitively say this film is good trans representation. I can only attest to the quality of the movie from my perspective and examine what I think it's saying and doing in terms of gender identity, presentation, and performativity. If you want to hear me talk about more real-world research on transphobia in South Korea, in the military, and in relation to discrimination, please also check out my Rainbow Eyes review. The title is kind of a tricky deal. The worldwide English title is Man on High Heels, which also stands in the US, UK, French, and Japanese markets. In contrast, the Italian and Russian releases translate the original Korean title, which is a Hangulized spelling of the English word high heel. Now, was this a marketing choice to match the trailer, or to draw people by the seeming contradictory phrasing of a man wearing high heels? I don't know, but for my review, I will be referring to the film as High Heel. Lastly, I will not be providing a full plot synopsis in this video. The films I completely summarize, like Method, Bungee Jumping of Their Own, or Rainbow Eyes, are so I can better dissect the problematic issues or to remove the requirement of actually watching the movie. For High Heel, my initial review will be spoiler-free, but the analysis portion will be spoiler-full. Okay, on to the film. As a content warning, this film does have nudity, but also features numerous potentially triggering elements, including violence and blood, police brutality, internalized transphobia, homophobia, and suicide. High Heels successfully balances entertaining action thriller elements like fight scenes and moments of dark comedy with a truly gripping individual story. Seung-won gives an excellent central performance. I saw him first as the Devil King in A Korean Odyssey, literally the over-the-top villain role I want for most dramas. But here, he is subtle, wrenching, and haunting. Overall, Yoon and her story are highly compelling. Transness is not a plot twist or a side story or framed as titillatingly deviant. There are conversations on and themes of gender presentation, sexuality, dysphoria, internalized transphobia, and the medical aspects of transition. Even though the backdrop and eventual plot momentum is essentially gangsters and cops, the emotional through-line is Yoon's emotional journey, struggle, and conflict. Yoon was not a transitioning or trans woman that was a heap of gratuitous trauma but with no interiority or desires of her own. It wasn't trauma porn to supplement a cis protagonist. By no means is she a perfect person, and as a cop she is very flawed, by behavior informed by her place in a hyper-masculine world. Altogether, I would give High Heel my first ever A+ on this channel. High Heel is not available on any mainstream streaming service, but if you look elsewhere for it, and you really should, you'll probably find it. So please, check this one, then come back and watch my spoiler-full discussion. The center of this film is obviously its protagonist Ji-wook, and what their journey has to say about both gender and the transgender experience in South Korea, albeit interwoven with action set pieces and thriller elements. And while I said above I can't definitively label the film as good trans representation, I can at least attest to its ambitiousness. Throughout High Heel, we are subtly provided with pieces of Ji-wook's backstory in dreams, flashbacks, and dialogue. Her memories clearly haunt her, specifically those of her teen years. Ji-wook knew from an early age that her gender assignment at birth did not align with her authentic self. She wore dresses and makeup, and was often isolated and bullied by her peers. She had one friend, a young boy who supported her and loved her just as she was. Interestingly, he is played by the actor Yoo Jun, who would eventually star in Color Rush in the first wave of modern Korean BL dramas, which I will get to at some point. Trans, genderqueer, and non-binary teens, due to their age, their residing country, culture, and education, as well as a slew of other factors, are usually placed in the difficult situation of having little to no access to information, support, and resources to articulate, process, and safely transition or affirm their gender identity. Furthermore, many who choose to associate or love trans people, particularly cis men, are harassed for these relationships, making both the target of transphobia and homophobia. Ji-wook's youthful crush is bullied with homophobic remarks, and perhaps for this reason, or many unknown circumstances, he takes his own life in front of Ji-wook. This proves to be a pivotal moment for her own survival, and perhaps out of her own fear, grief, and a complete absence of support, she withdraws. Ji-wook detransitions. The primary reason for detransitioning or post-transition regret, whether that be social or medical transitioning, is social pressure. It's not a simple matter of changing one's mind or being mistaken. It's a byproduct or reaction to family pressure, the threat of disowning, disapproval, or even hostility, of financial pressure, having no medical coverage, losing one's job, losing housing, or being unable to financially care for themselves, or of social pressure, facing discrimination, prejudice, and potential violence. Actually, the rates of transitioning or detransitioning are generally understudied in South Korea, likely for a variety of reasons, but the same stigmas and points of bigoted resistance present in countries where these statistics are available are well and alive in Korea too. For example, Ji-wook's parents are completely absent from the story. She's lost her only friend, and the time and place of her existence is severely lacking in resources or support. Her choice to detransition is not a sign of weakness or confusion, it's representative of the experiences of many, the choice to adapt and survive. And adapt she does. Ji-wook completes the mandatory military enlistment by serving in the Marine Corps. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that she chooses this branch of the armed forces. Their training is intense, amphibious, versatile, and fierce. They also have the lowest percentage of female enlistment, numbering under 500 with almost 30,000 personnel. Ji-wook is also fulfilling a requirement that is intentionally and fundamentally gendered. All biological or cisgendered men, barring medical exemption, are mandated to serve. Those 2 years in conscripted service can be highly formative but also isolating. And as outlined in my Rainbow Eyes video, the Korean military has numerous discriminatory policies and a history of abuses against LGBT enlistees. And yet Ji-wook chooses a branch that is particularly demanding and potentially punishing to the body. More on that later. Eventually, Ji-wook transitions to civilian life and becomes a police officer, then a detective. Law enforcement is another arena that is incredibly male-dominated, women making up around 13% of the South Korean police force. They supposedly represent law and order and authority, and in the popular imagination at least, it's considered a very physical job, requiring a body that is strong, capable, ferocious, and can instill fear and respect. Like the military, it can be physically demanding and put the body in danger of injury, with a particular veneration of survival and battle scars. Despite all the background I've discussed in a linear manner, this is exposited organically throughout the film. The film's story actually begins years into Ji-wook's tenure on the force, just as she is on the brink of retirement. Unbeknownst to everyone in her life, she's quitting so she can medically and socially transition. The first fight sequence establishes Ji-wook as the kind of John Wick of Seoul. They directly confront a gangster in a VIP club, have no need for or fear of guns, are skilled with a blade, and are completely unstoppable and feared by all criminals. To colleagues and villains alike, Ji-wook is an epitome of hypermasculinity. In fact, the opening scene highlights a jacked, ripped, scarred Ji-wook in a sauna, the camera lingering over their embattled and defined physique. When a man tries to talk to them, Ji-wook gets up, penis full out, off screen of course, and in this person's face. The body becomes a site of gender discipline, resistance, endurance, and domination. When the villain speaks of first meeting Jiwook, he specifically recalls admiring them as a real man. Then when this same villain breaks into Jiwook's apartment, he assumes the detective must live with a woman due to the presence of women's clothes, the residence's tidy appearance, and the fact that the TV is on a home shopping network instead of sports. In High Heel, the world of cops and robbers, who I'm sure were both once soldiers, is a hotbed of examining gender, its facets of mainstream toxic ugliness as well as its compelling and fluid potentialities. The startling similarities between police and villains in terms of masculinity is telling. Dominant or traditional forms of patriarchal masculinity lean towards the stoic and aggressive, with expression heavily restricted and policed, but celebrating respect in the form of fear as well as physical violence. Whether detective or criminal, homophobia and transphobia persist, as well as misogyny, with women absent to be used as bait or as victims. But their similarities converge significantly in their idolization of Jiwook. The irony being that her authentic self would completely disrupt this hyper-masculine ideal they've projected onto her. And not only is this a projection, but a deliberate cultivation on the part of Jiwook, both for survival and perhaps as a thorough attempt to resist what she knew for a long time. Jiwook disciplined her body, controlled it, trained it, beat it, and scarred it, until she eventually made the choice to affirm herself. Toxic masculinity, as represented by Jiwook's environment, is all uncompromising gender performances and blustering pretense. It's surface-level scars and violence, and ultimately, pain. And she is not exempt from the physical brutality exemplified by the masculinity of her colleagues and their criminal foes. She is a brutal detective herself, who frequently bends the rules with the same violence. But just as important, and if not more so, than Jiwook's dynamics with cis men is her relationship with other trans women and her own transness. Unlike Rainbow Eyes, Jiwook does not exist as a solitary trans woman, but within a sizable, if underground, community. After the opening fight scene showcases Jiwook's prowess, we next see her in an unofficial clinic receiving hormones. She and a doctor discuss options for breast implants, the possibility of a tracheal shave surgery in the US, and why the hormone therapy hasn't been effective for her, largely due to her continued maintenance of her muscled body, which has gone against the doctor's orders. The doctor actually calls Jiwook's body a mess, like a cyborg, due to the amount of scarring and surgeries she's had as a result of injuries on the job. A few things to note. 1. Seoul is considered the plastic surgery capital of the world, with the highest rate of procedures per capita per year, and yet many trans people still seek surgery somewhere else, like in the US or Thailand, which may speak to cost, stigma, expertise, or medical coverage. 2. Medical transitioning is a multifaceted and layered journey that can include procedures, at least for male to female participants, such as a mammoplasty or breast augmentation, a vaginoplasty to construct a vagina, an orchiectomy to remove testicles, and facial feminization surgeries, including tracheal shaving for the Adam's apple, modifications to the cheek, nose, chin, jaw, and even the vocal cords for vocal feminization. Some trans people get these in addition to hormones. Some get none of these done for a variety of reasons. There is no one path to affirmation, and surgery is a lengthy, painful, and complex process to apply for and undergo. And 3. Transitioning as an adult or after puberty can be very different than transitioning earlier in life, as the body drastically changes during that time. Hormonal changes, growth, body hair, muscle mass, fat distribution, height, etc. The resulting dysphoria can be incredibly painful and severe, as your body develops an aggressive resistance to the self, which is why sensitive and adequate care saves the lives of trans youth. Back to the film. Jiwook has multiple encounters with trans women and trans-inclusive spaces. In order to arrange for her bottom surgery, she meets with another trans woman at a church. There they discuss the religious and philosophical implications of transness, giving a voice to what many transphobic Christians potentially think. Is their existence in defiance of God, since they are changing God's perfect creation? The elder says they live at the gates of hell, and is able to give a spot-on read of Yoon's hypermasculine performance as being exactly what it is, a compensation for internalized transphobia. Jiwook reflects and admits she thinks that God has abandoned people like them. After their church rendezvous, Jiwook is taken to a burlesque club, the Seoul Gen Club. It should come as no surprise that performative spaces like burlesque and drag clubs, where gender presentation and roles are blurred and subverted already, would also attract trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming persons. At the club, Jiwook meets numerous trans women, and her initiation prompts a conversation about womanhood. French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir famously said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." And that in many ways describes the ensuing conversation. One woman states that the surgeries do not make the woman, but rather you become a woman to get the surgery. Another trans woman named Dodo says, "You're finally a real woman when you become numb to people's stares, comments, and opinions." An older trans woman shares concerns that Jiwook will have a hard time making a living after transitioning, especially since closeting isn't a clear-cut option as opposed to LGB people. Jiwook admits that, like many, she's only ever experimented with clothes and makeup at home as she's scared to go out in public. With the women's encouragement, Jiwook makes her first attempt to go out, although she hasn't quite figured out her aesthetic yet, and has an awkward run-in with the family and seniors in the building elevator. It also brings up this interesting linguistic complication, the changing of honorifics. In the Korean language, there's a sort of suffix you add to people's names based on age, familiarity, and gender, both of the speaker and who is being spoken to. Consequently, transitioning fundamentally changes how people should address her, but if they should refuse to accept it, it's almost like being misgendered or being called by a dead name. Just something I hadn't thought of prior to this film. From here, Jiwook's worlds begin to collide. Professional with her cop colleagues, the adversarial with the gangsters out to get her, and the personal with her private choice to transition. The gangster raids the clinic while Jiwook is getting her hair and makeup professionally done for the first time. The sight is very affirming to her even as a colleague begs them to come back and defeat the villain. Now, I'm skipping over a lot of the fights and the escalation of stakes in terms of the action and thriller parts. That's all well integrated and entertaining as well. With that, I'll be skipping towards the end, which has haunted me ever since I watched the film. Just as she is sitting at the airport, presenting publicly as a woman, and waiting for her flight to the US for surgery, Jiwook is forced back when someone she cares about is in danger. Fighting with ferocity and skill, she looks like a genderqueer matador or a samurai in order to confront the gangster. I won't reveal the entire outcome of the battle, but the final shot is wrenching in ways that I did not imagine possible. It's not the conventional tragic death of the trans woman that we've seen before, but something more personal, material, spiritual, and operating at the deepest levels of the self, of I, of me, and what it means to be. To reiterate, I've given High Heel an A+. This does not mean the film is beyond reproach. For example, the choice to make the trans protagonist a cop. The police are an institutional symbol with deep ties to the oppression of LGBT+ communities worldwide, including in South Korea, so viewers have a right to take issue with it. Or they might not like the ending or the depictions of violence. Nevertheless, High Heel, for me, marries genre film, effective execution, emotion, and queer representation into an excellent movie with compelling ambitions and forwarding conversations of gender and sexuality in Korea, and laying bare the constructedness of identities long considered fixed in society. So again, please check this one out. It's worth it. Until next time, goodbye, farewell, and 안녕히 계세요.